welcoming everyone here to Perspectives. It's a pleasure to have you with us. Every Sabbath evening at this time at 6 o'clock, we begin our very well-liked and loved program, and we are appreciating the fact that you are with us. And this evening is going to be exciting, as others have been, if not better. And so we look forward to it. So without further ado, I'm just going to ask Chris to come on and say what's on his heart here. He's always here with us, and he always has a great word for us. So Chris, come on and talk to us.
Thank you, Pastor Wright. Folks, it's good to be here at this town hall this evening. In 2005, Archbishop Desmond Tutu wrote a very important book. It hasn't gotten a lot of press, but I try to actually share some of it going forward. As you know, he was one of the architecture of peace within South Africa and liberated without South Africa that had a really tough time, especially with law enforcement. And so that's why this book is very important to me. I'm going to read with you. I'm going to invite you to look at the book. This is what Nelson Mandela had to say about this book. Desmond Tutu shows us each of how to transform our pain and sorrow into hope and confidence in the future. Whether you are the head of a country, head of a household, you will cherish his words. So in the spirit of, and the spirit of biblical transformational algorithm, I bring that kind of idea and inspiration and desire that this evening, as we engage in such an important topic, that we'll find that type of possibility moving forward in this conversation.
All right, so at this time, I'm going to pray, and we will then go through with our program. So let us bow. Father, God, we are so grateful that you have always been with your people and that you're with us here this evening. We're grateful for the chance we've been able to embrace to collaborate, to educate our sons. We're grateful for this great foundation, and we pray continued success. And for the program that we are about to begin, we ask you, Lord, to guide in the discourse. May everything be done decently and in order. May all of those who are on this platform be benefited by the information that will be transmitted. And we pray, Lord, that this evening's program will always be remembered in history because of what it provided for all of us. Thank you for hearing our prayer. This we pray in the name of the Father, the name of the Son, and the name of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. It's my deep honor and privilege to introduce the moderator of and the founder of Collaborate to Educate Our Sons, who's pressing this issue and has organized this town hall. Is Dr. Bertram Melbourne. He's a professor of biblical language and literature at Howard School of Divinity. He has served many capacities there, from interim dean, from associate dean of academic affairs. He's steeped in educational institutions where he has served several other places. Dr. Melbourne has a solid background in theological education, teaching, and administration. And he also conducts workshops, national and international, in various issues, from biblical studies to AIDS, to Christianity in Africa, to clergy care, to integration of faith and learning. He's also pastored the local church. But his legacy engagement is the one that he's so focused on this day. It's Collaborate to Educate Our Sons. Here, Collaborate to Educate Our Sons is an interfaith institution building caring relationship into the lives of our young men of color in particular, that they can get to college or other places where their lives can be purposeful. And as they lead this, explore in this town hall this afternoon, a way forward out of the tragic relationship that they've had with the police. So come prepared as he applied the biblical formula for freedom as we move forward. Dr. Melbourne, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Chris, for your kind words of introduction. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome each one who has joined us. I know there are others who are coming. I see as I look across the screen, not just people from one area, but across the nation and internationally. I'd like to give a special shout out to a colleague of mine, Reverend Tara Taylor, and also to the diplomat in residence at Howard University, Dr. Yolanda Kearney. Among others, we are happy that each of you has joined us. Collaborate to Educate Our Sons, CEOS, is an international, nonprofit, multi-faith organization that seeks to help boys and young people achieve their full potential. CEOS is built on a set of core values, including trust, faith, character, and service at local, national, and international levels. Its mission is to help youth achieve their full potential, and its vision is restoring balance to strengthen the global community. Why are we singling out boys at a time when women are just breaking the glass ceiling? This is a good question. For in 1949, 70% of college population was male. Today, it is around 36% and falling for African Americans and people of color. There is need for parity. These are the days of COVID-19 when Black and brown males are being disproportionately affected. These are days of injustice when young Black and brown males are being made to feel that their lives are at the mercy of others who either have their knees on their necks or shoot them causelessly with no consequences. Indeed, like Abner, they're dying prematurely, needlessly, causelessly, foolishly, and recklessly. This is a wrong that needs attention. Young Black males need education when white high school dropouts are wealthier than Black and Hispanic college graduates. And when Black college graduates have a lower home ownership rate than white high school dropouts. And this is information from 2020. This is why CEOS has been doing its utmost to provide boys and young men, their parents, teachers, and mentors the best information to survive and thrive in these difficult times. Navigating encounters with the police is one such area. CEOS offers programs and services aimed at supporting, educating, and mentoring young men, their parents, teachers, and mentors, granted the degree to which boys are misjudged and their learning styles go unrecognized and unaddressed. We do this through issuing a quarterly newsletter, conducting workshops, delivering valuable training and correspondence, and by awarding scholarships to deserving youth. In the last 7 years, we have given more than 34 scholarships, and at least one of our scholarship winner is on board with us right now. We have honored over 30 persons and entities that have done exemplary work, and we have trained thousands of young men, their parents, teachers, and mentors in the CEOS philosophy. And some of our honorees are on with us now as well. To be more effective, we need your collaboration. Welcome to today's event that is designed to discuss a systemic problem in the American society. So sit back, enjoy, and learn. And should you decide to join us by becoming a member of the CEO's family, or giving a donation, or responding in some positive way, we would love it. We accept contributions for scholarships, workshops, and the online educational training platform we will be constructing shortly. You can contribute through PayPal on our website or on Cash App, where we are $CEOS CPR, or on Venmo, where we are the @ CEOS CPR. This event is being broadcast live on Zoom, I think Facebook, and live stream. Call a friend and invite them to watch with you. First, rules of engagement. If you are on Zoom, and I think all of us are, most of us are, please mute yourselves and stay muted. It is disrupting, to unmute yourself and have us and have your words and activities be broadcast to everyone. So please mute yourselves. And if you have a question, please write it in the chat. And as you saw last time, we deal with the questions in the chat so that you'll have a chance to get your word across. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our panel for this evening. And each one will have a 1 to 2 minute opening statement, and then we will go to your questions. First of all, Mr. John Ashmead, a lawyer, is a senior assistant counsel for Yale New Haven Health System. Is also the assistant public affairs and religious liberty director for the Atlantic Union Conference. He serves his local church, the Bread of Life Fellowship, as the first elder. He graduated from Howard University School of Law. He's married with 2 children. Miss Petra Aaron, also an attorney. She is an experienced litigator with substantial jury trial experience. Prior to joining her current law firm, she worked as an assistant state's attorney for almost 13 years in the office of the state's attorney general for Maryland, Baltimore City, prosecuting some of Baltimore's most heinous crimes. Her most recent assignment was in the Special Victims Unit, where she prosecuted child abuse cases, elder abuse cases, sex crime cases, and child homicide. Throughout her career as an assistant state's attorney, she prided herself on being a victim's advocate, serving the citizens of Baltimore City by being a fierce, respected trial attorney with an unflappable demeanor. Welcome to Mrs. Denise Conrad. Denise, one of 5 children born of Ecuadorian parents who immigrated to the US in the early 1950s. From their struggles of acculturalization and discrimination that she experienced as a child, she developed a strong interest in justice and in helping the marginalized. This desire for fairness led her to become a Broward County Corrections Officer at age 19 and a police officer at 22. For 2 years, she served as one of the nation's first manned Batmobiles, that is, breath alcohol testing mobile unit. In 1990, she joined the FBI as a special agent, where she investigated a variety of matters for 25 years. She is a certified life coach from the Life Coach Institute of Orange County, which then led to a 2019 Master of Arts degree in Pastoral Counseling with Lifelong Learning Cognate. Welcome, Denise. You'll remember Dr. Fred Lee is a 31-year-old veteran of the police force with experience going from the beat to the office. He is currently an administrative desk supervisor for the Technical Division branch of the Pentagon Force Protection Agency. Dr. Lee is a father and an ordained minister who holds theological degrees from Howard University School of Divinity. He's also a board member of CEOS. He currently serves as a pastor in the Baptist Church in Washington, D.C. Nkosi Plummer. Nkosi is a recent graduate from Oakwood University with a degree in broadcast journalism and a minor in ministerial theology. He was raised in Atlanta, Georgia, and is from a Caribbean background. He currently serves as a video editor and team leader at HCI Hope Channel International, and is the co-founder of a media ministry called Generation Forward. His passions include creating music, learning new skills, discussing and executing ideas, youth ministry, and Bible study. One of his favorite quotes is, "If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together." Miss Colleen Silvera is a 1989 graduate of Howard University School of Law, where she received her Jewish doctorate, cum laude. She was a member of the Howard Law Journal. As a law student, she served as a legal intern with the Honorable Stanley Sporkin of the United States District Court. A former CPA, she holds a BA in accounting from Atlantic Union College. She began her legal career at Wiles Gotshal and Manges, in Washington, D.C., practicing in corporate and international tax law. Her practice areas include estate planning, probate administration, immigration, and bankruptcy. She has served as an adjunct professor at Howard University School of Law, and we are glad for her representing mothers on the panel this evening. Welcome to Mr. Ronnie Vanderhorst. Mr. Vanderhorst and his brother Stefan are co-founders of Prepare Our Youth, Inc. Prepare Our Youth incorporated in 1981 as a Washington, D.C. based nonprofit organization servicing children, youth, and families through education, counseling, and outreach. Ronnie has designed and developed a new initiative called Home Boy, helping our males excel with breaking our yokes. This is a 12-session group level, culturally specific intervention for Black heterosexual males who have experienced trauma in their upbringing, causing an interrupted spirit and making them susceptible to substance abuse, violence, incarceration, etc. We are happy that you have joined us as a father to give that perspective. And finally, we have Lieutenant Henry Woods from the Pentagon Force Protection Agency, where he has served for 18 years. Lieutenant Woods has established himself as a transparent leader with over 25 years experience in state, local, and federal law enforcement. As a police lieutenant with the Pentagon Police Department, he is admired and often looked upon as someone who inspires, promotes confidence, and has an encouraging outlook on life. Lieutenant Woods is committed to reestablishing a community policing dialogue through educating both law enforcement and the community in recognizing and respecting cultural differences. I'm sure these skills will help us. So this is our panel. I'm going to ask each one now to give us a 2 minutes overview of how they see the topic, again, of Black males and the police, beginning conversation towards a solution. We'll begin with Mr. Ashmead.
I am muted. Sorry about that. Dr. Melbourne, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this panel and this very important discussion. You know, I have been thinking about it since our last discussion and trying to figure out solutions to this problem. It is a real problem. And I think the first thing we need to do is to acknowledge that it's there. And I think that's really an issue that is going on in our society. We're not acknowledging this as a real problem. And the group that I think has fallen short the most is the church. And, you know, not just the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but the Christian church as a whole. You know, as we have looked at these incidents over the last couple of years, you know, the church has not really come forward to address this issue. And it is my firm belief that until the churches collectively come forward and say racism is a problem, police brutality is a problem, and it's something that we need to address, this issue is going to continue in the same way that it is, with incidents occurring, protests occurring, and no real progress taking place. So, you know, as we begin the dialogue, you know, my view is that we need to figure out a way of motivating the church to become engaged. And I think if we do that, we'll begin to see some solutions taking place.
Good. Miss Aaron. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very thankful to Dr. Melbourne for the invitation. One of the things when thinking about the subject, we had a previous program on this particular issue, and now we're here to discuss a solution. And I think what came to mind for me in reaching a resolution is 3 words: familiarization, allyship, mentorship. Part of the misunderstanding, I believe, there is between law enforcement and minority males is a lack of knowledge. They don't know each other. I think officers who grow up in a particular community, they get to know that community, they get to know their neighbors. The citizens they serve are their neighbors. The people that they may have to arrest one day are their neighbors. And I think that if everyone becomes your neighbor, and this is vice versa too, this is for young Black males as well, young minority males, get to know your officers. Once everyone gets to know each other, there's less fear. You're not afraid of your neighbor. If you have to arrest your neighbor, you're going to treat them with dignity. If you are approached by your neighbor, you're not going to think the worst of them. I think that will be very helpful. Allyship. I think it's important for young minority males to identify their allies, many of whom are on this call this evening. Every officer isn't bad. Every member of law enforcement isn't bad. Find the allies. You can find them through work, through school, through church. Find and identify those allies. Those allies can go ahead of you, can speak well of you, can prepare the way for you. And they can speak for you in rooms that you will never be able to be in. Which leads me to mentorship, which is a part of this program this evening. Allowing older minority males to show younger minority males the way. If you've made it over 50, 60 years old, that is a major feat in America for a young minority male. So educate. Teach the younger generation, how did you make it? What tactics did you use? How did you come through? And reach back. A lot of this might be, very familiar to this group because we are all a part of this program, but I think we need to get the message out. Get to know each other. Officers, the citizens are your neighbors. These people that you serve are your neighbors. You treat them with dignity. Citizens, these officers are also your neighbors. Don't be afraid of them. Identify the allies who can speak for you in case you do run into a rogue person. That person can go ahead of you. and protects you from within. And then always reach out for help. I think all of those things taken together can be part of the solution, I think, for this problem.
Thank you. Thank you. Denise.
Hello, everybody. I'm Denise Conrad. Thank you, Dr. Melbourne, Dr. Lee, for having a hand in having my presence here tonight. So I thank you very much. So some of the things, what an incredibly important program. And I thank you again for having me here. And thinking about the portion where I think maybe I have some insight and in my background was from the years in the FBI and also as a police officer and seeing the hiring process and going through the police academy and seeing some of the questions that were referencing those kinds of categories. There's huge space to make changes that would include science-based changes, that would be research-based, that would be involving psychologists to, if you would, incorporate an assessment that would ensure against or for racial appreciation, cultural appreciation within the persons that are hired, to bring a person who is more inclined to work socially from the heart, to want to encourage and uplift all cultures, and not to have that racial influence, which can quite come out if you do psychological testing, which oftentimes is not done for police officers on the street. So I think that is a key component, and teaching officers in the academy to be more socially in tune with the things that can be going on with a person's family, with their background, with their cultural diversity, with their challenges, with their life, instead of just using the gun. Why do we just reach for the gun? That should not be what's going on first. And that's where I see a huge piece could be added and changed, examined and transformed in the police culture.
Thank you. Reverend Dr. Lee.
Again, I thank everybody for coming tonight, and I pray that this is edifying and helpful to you all. Again, I'm one of the board members of CEOS, and I'm just proud to be a part of this organization as we're trying to come up with solutions to this systemic problem. And being a police officer for over 32 years, I've seen a lot, I've been through a lot, and I've been on both sides of the fence, so to speak, being a Black man as well as being a police officer. And I'll say this, is that this problem is deeply rooted, not just with the police, but with the organizations that the police belong to, as well as the counties and the cities that the police belong in. This problem is deeply rooted because it's a mindset that needs to change. It needs to change in order for us to have a better awareness of who we are as people. It needs to change because we're looking at a systematic way of eliminating a culture. And it's sad to say that the further away we get from the date of all these incidences that have occurred, the further away we feel the need to correct the problem. So what we have is great moments, but not a great movement. And what we're moving away from is, the further we get away from 9/11, the less we feel about terrorism. the further we get away from George Floyd's incident of being killed on the street, the less we're going to remember what it is to watch a person die. So with that being said, I want to reinforce the fact that we need to have, as Denise has spoken about, we need to have more psychological testing of our police officers, and not just one time, but I believe that it should be done on a semi-annually or a yearly basis. Even when a person is involved in an encounter and they're put on desk duty, that officer should go through a psychological testing. This is a very hard job to have, and either the pen or the bullet can change a person's life. And it's oftentimes that the pen does mightier than the bullet does, because how you write up a situation is clearly an indicator of what you believe. So I know we're suffering as a Black people from the atrocities that are being put upon us, but we have to come together as a group, and we have to think about this thing clearly and rationally and move forward in it. And I, for one, am willing to help out in any way I can to do that, because I believe that I'm a peace officer and not a law enforcer. I believe that in order for us to shake these walls down and tear these walls down, we must change the culture itself. We must change the language that we're called cops and police officers, and become more peace officers and people that are here to help and serve. And as I said earlier in the last conversation, I'm here to help you to be a safe person. I'm here to be a safe officer. I'm here to be a person that you come to and not run away from. And until we get to that level of understanding, we're always going to have these conflicts. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Great moments, but not great movement. I like that. Let's reflect on that. Okay. And Kosi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nkose Plummer. Thank you, Dr. Melbourne, for inviting me to be on this panel. I just thank CEOS, just how they've mentored me and continue to mentor me in college and even out, and many other men alike. I am a Black male in America, and I'm facing this head on. I'm facing this right now. I remember growing up, I lived in a poor area, hearing gunshots at night. I remember walking down the street with a group of my friends. They considered 3 or more Black males together a gang. I remember different scenarios where police have knocked on my door because they're looking for a young man who is Black, who looks like me. I feel that these situations have shaped my view, or helped shape my view on police officers. And from what I'm seeing on social media, on the news, almost every media, it's almost looking like a us versus them type of thing. It's almost looking like there's no hope, because as soon as one thing happens, another thing happens. A couple months later, we see, oh, another young boy has been shot by police. I've been in situations where I've been in the car with my friend driving to school and being stopped. Not because we're going too fast, but I definitely felt some racial profiling in the questions that were asked. I know that this runs deep, this issue, and there's nothing new under the sun. There's many things that have happened progressively for the Black community, but we always see that there is a, I guess, antagonist to the story. There's always those who are trying to depress, oppress. And I believe that it's put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth concerning how they view and feel towards police. Oh, I don't feel safe in my neighborhood, but I'm not gonna call a police officer because like that's worse than what's happening. I agree that there needs to be change. And I do believe that there are some change makers in the police force, as I see Dr. Frederick Lee and Lieutenant Henry Woods here. But it is still an ongoing issue. The solutions that I see right now, and as we dialogue today, I'm sure more will appear. But one of the solutions I see is, I believe, is it Dr. Erin, Petra Erin? Or she alluded to mentorship, which CEOS is doing, and also education, educating ourselves on how to respond to police, as well as understanding who we are within ourselves and how God sees us. Because it does run deep, even in families, broken families. A lot of young men, they don't have self-worth. And so I'm looking forward to more solutions and just to give you my experience and my take on the issue at hand. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Silvera.
Thank you, Dr. Melbourne, for the invitation to participate on this panel. I would say that we're never going to solve the police mistreatment of Black people by appealing to them to do better. There are policies that we need to develop, but I believe that good policies in the hands of a racist system is only as good as the people we put in charge to implement it. The ultimate solution is multifaceted. It includes the economic, social, psychological, and other issues. And we should work on all of those. But until the system sees us as human beings, it's not going to change. And we are going to have to find a way to fight back so that they feel it. We need to go to the polls. We need to vote. We need to put in place officials that are strong enough, determined to implement good policies. We need prosecutors who are not afraid of the police, that will stand up. We need to groom our young people to be a part of the system. We cannot change it just by marching and asking them to do better and to see us. We're always teaching our Black men how to survive. We need to do that. It's necessary, but I'm tired of teaching people how to survive. We need to teach them how to change it. And I think of someone with COVID on a ventilator. We're really teaching them how to survive the ventilator. I feel like that's what we're doing with young Black men. We're teaching them how to survive forever, survive. We need to get them vaccinated. We need to get them before they get the disease. We need to head the system off. We have to go to the polls. We have to be engaged. There are many protections that the police have, and I think we need to change some of those. Things like qualified immunity, and Attorney Aaron could speak more to that. But there are just some protections that need to be removed. And don't misunderstand, I'm not suggesting at all the police are bad, but it's a systemic problem. We're tired of marching and telling, put your hands where they can see them, and keep your license here. We still have to do that. But so that we're not having this conversation 100 years from now, we need to be more involved. And lastly, I'd say I enjoy these discussions, but I need a sense of what are we going to do after these discussions. We don't want these academic discussions to end here. In addition to coming up with ideas that could work, should our next step be, how do we implement some of these things? Is it in the mentoring of the grooming of the people? But we need to go further.
Thank you. Provocative, okay. Elder Van der Vorst.
Thank you, sir, for the invitation. Elder Neely Fuller, who was the mentor of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, our esteemed African-American woman psychiatrist based in Washington, D.C. She's now an ancestor, but he was our mentor. And he talked about the 9 areas of people activity: education, economics, entertainment, media, law, politics, religion, sex, which is family, and war. And all of these 9 areas of people activity are functionaries of white supremacy. They are the institutions of this particular country. And being a functionary of white supremacy, that means to the greatest extent it is in stone. For the purposes of this discussion, we're dealing with law, a functionary of white supremacy. And so I'm not bringing a prognostication of doom and gloom, but I do agree with Dr. Derek Bell, who wrote Faces at the Bottom of the Well and We Are Not Saved, which concluded that there is a permanence of racism. And basically, he posits that we're going to have to chip away at it. At the same time, as we address the salient things in our community. So I would suggest that everybody begin with reading The Blueprint for Black Power by Dr. Amos Wilson. It's over 600 pages, but he deals with everything. The Blueprint for Black Power for the 21st century, Dr. Amos Wilson. We don't have to reinvent wheels, but there is information out here that we can utilize. But my main point simply is this: because these 9 areas of people activity are functionaries and continue to be functionaries of white supremacy, then my premise is never discuss the fruit without understanding the root. What we actually are talking about is behavior, but behavior basically is fighting the battle where the battle isn't instead of where the battle is. The root of all maladjustment is in the thinking. Mm-hmm. As a man or woman thinks, so is he or she. So if we're going to begin to address or to chip away with this, we're going to have to go to the root of socialization. How these police officers, how brothers in the village are socialized. Because socialization has a lot to do with it. White supremacy has a major factor in the socialization of whites as well as blacks, with various pathologies, with one of the tentacles of pathology being racism. So the socialization, what is the socialization? How has it impacted the mind, the thinking, the behavior, the lifestyle? Something has happened when there is not a profound appreciation for the humanity of all people. Something has happened in the socialization process. And so I do have some other solutions, but I just wanted to start with that. Racism, white supremacy is permanent. It's not going anywhere, but we have to work through it, around it, under it, so that we can do the things that are necessary. And what is most necessary? I believe it is harvesting new generations. This solution may not happen in my lifetime, but I'm definitely sowing into, we have to sow into the millennials who are not young. I mean, they're 40 years old, many of them now. Gens X, Y, Z. We must harvest new generations so that we can vet leadership, vet politicians, so that we can actually do the things we need to pass the baton. I'll stop there, and maybe at another time in here, I'll share specific things that I know can and will work.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. All right. We are down to Lieutenant Woods.
Good afternoon, all. Dr. Melbourne and Dr. Lee, I definitely thank you guys for allowing me to be a part of this once again, to touch on something that's definitely a problem in our society that has been and will continue to be. Like Dr. Lee, I speak from both sides of the spectrum, but as a Black man and as a Black man in law enforcement, and recognizing the problem that exists. We all here because we share a common goal to come up with some solution to change. I'm a firm believer that you can't make a difference where you don't make a deposit. So I thank all who have participated, who are on board to come up with solutions as much as we can to direct this change. This is a problem. It's a systemic problem that, like the gentleman said, it's not going to go anywhere. All officers are not bad. We're not saying that, and we can't say that. But we have enough of them that in most cases influence the ones who are not bad. A lot of officers are put in situations where, they either can't speak up or scared to speak up based on situations or ramifications that may happen. So we have to change that. But we all agree that it starts with understanding. Understanding, from a police officer point of view, but most important, police officer understanding from a community point of view. Like I said, it's something that we have to continue to fight. We will be continuing to fight from this day forward. And I'm just glad to be a part of this and willing to step up to do whatever it takes to help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Remember, please write your questions in the chat and we will retrieve them from there and ensure that they are aired. The first question that we have then coming out of last week says, it has been said that racism is not a virus of the body, it is a virus of the mind. And unfortunately, it can be lethal. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think we need to develop a vaccine to treat it? If not, how will it be solved? In other words, while scientists may be able to develop a vaccine for coronavirus, what can or should be done for the racial virus? Who would like to take that?
I'll jump on that, and I'll say this, is that the vaccine is not a cure, but it is a way of dealing with the situation. And that, if we're going to use that as a preface of this conversation, I would say that the vaccine for racism is to come together in a way that we speak to each other on the level of understanding. And the only way we can do that is that we have to sit down with those who are willing to sit down with us and talk about racism from a very grassroots position. As Blacks in law enforcement, we can't make a change until the ground is fertile enough for it to be changeable. And as a problem I see with law enforcement today, as well as it was 30 years ago, is that we're only the playmakers, we're not the play changers. And we can't change it because every time we try to change it, the change makers will change it up again. So again, we do the best that we can, but as a cure, we have to address it from as Dr. Vanderhoos said, we have to change it from the root. And it's not even the root; it's the soil that it's growing in that needs to be changed. We had in Luke 8, it speaks about the rocky soil, the weed soil, and the trampled soil, being soils that the seed doesn't ferment and grow. But it's that rich earth that the seeds do grow in. And it's that fourth soil that we need to get to. But in order to get to that rich earth, we need to remove the rocks, we need to kill the weeds, and we need to not trample on the ground that needs to grow the seeds. And that seed is the word. And the word of God goes forth and it does what it's supposed to do in the right minds, in the right faces. And it's not always going to fall on the right people all the time, but it's spread out because we need to understand that we have to do better to be better. Now, I may sound like I'm going all over the place with this, but what I'm trying to get to is that in order for us to understand each other, we need to come to a common ground and to understand each other. That is that if we're going to deal with this situation, we need to be honest with each other, both Black and white. We need to want to work to become better towards each other, because I don't know about you, but I'm tired of going to funerals. I'm tired of seeing people die. I'm tired of seeing people maimed because people don't know how to handle their situations. I know that a lot of white officers are out there that are afraid to deal with the situation, but they put on the uniform because they get a paycheck. So maybe a solution to that is that paycheck comes with a high responsibility, and maybe they need to lose their paycheck, even if they are on administrative leave, so that they understand the severity of what they're doing. This problem is so deeply rooted that it frustrates the heck out of me.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Can I add something? You know, when I think about, you know, I can't remember the year when I was in law school. Derek Bell came and gave a talk on his books, and you know, he, similarly to what Dr. Vanderhorst shared, you know, concluded that racism is permanent. It's not going anywhere. And so one of my classmates said, well, what are we supposed to do? And his response was, give them hell. You know, but when you think about racism and sin, you know, they are both something permanent within the human family. And, you know, we can't ignore the fact that there is a spiritual dimension to racism, meaning that it is something deep within all of us. And if we are not careful to deal with it, it's something that can infect us. And, you know, it's difficult to get rid of. And so part of the solution, I'm not saying that this will resolve everything, but part of the solution is that the community of faith has to tackle this. We have to develop a robust theology that is critical of racism And it has to permeate throughout all of our churches, whether we worship on Sabbath or we worship on Sunday. That is, until that begins to happen, this problem will not be addressed unless people connect it to faith.
Good. Anyone else? All right.
I just wanted to,
Go right ahead, Petra.
no, I just thought of something when we were having this discussion. I was listening to Dr. Vanderhorst and to Dr. Lee and to John Ashby. I remember growing up, we would have these discussions in our home with my father when he was alive, my uncles, etc. And we would argue about politics and about all these different changes and all of that. And my father used to say, and he used to remind me, he says, oh, get ready to fight. You're fighting now as a teenager. You're making these arguments, but be prepared to continue to fight because these things are going to be in existence. Racism, sexism, classism will always be in existence until Jesus comes. And so Mr. Ashby is completely correct in saying that the church has to get involved. We have to get involved with the knowledge that these things will always be in existence until Jesus comes, Jesus comes and cleanses the earth of sin. And so yes, I was just piggybacking off of the former comments.
All right, I'm going to ask a related question. If I
can I do a quick input?
Go right ahead.
We know that people who identify counterfeit money don't study counterfeit money. They only study real money so that they can immediately identify a counterfeit. So if we're really trying to study racism, we're not really looking at, are we looking at what we really need to be looking at? Again, because her office was down the street from our office, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, when she was alive, is a child psychiatrist, and we refer quite a number of children to her. But she said something very prolific, and I think that this may tie in the Black church, and may tie in a lot of things, our Black organizations. She said, Black children are our most valuable possession. I'm quoting her now. Any meaningful discussion in the future of Black people must be predicated upon that people's maximal development of its children. And then she asked 4 questions. Number 1, will all of our Black children be maximally developed? Number 2, if so, who will ultimately be responsible for the maximal development of Black children? Question number 3, if they're not to be maximally developed, what do we think will happen to that mass of human beings? And number 4, are white people in any way looking to Black people for the maximal development of white children? We have to take responsibility to harvest our generations. We have to bring forth back rites of passage. We have to bring forth our mentoring programs. We have to have our Saturday schools. Dr. Miriam Wright Edelman of Children's Defense Fund, you could start a Saturday school in your particular community. We need our Black organizations, sororities, fraternities, who are probably doing good work in certain areas. We need a moratorium on everything, and for the next 10 years, it needs to be on Black children and youth. Our whole focus, the churches, the Black entities, everything needs to focus on the harvesting of new generations so that we can holistically develop them so that they can grow and that they can govern their own communities.
Thank you, sir. Now, I have 2 related questions. One is, all of us here are more or less agreed that there is a problem and that the problem is racism. But as long as there's denial on the other side, can we solve the problem? Is it possible to fix a problem that one does not know one has, or one refuses to acknowledge that one has? How would we react to that?
May I?
Sure, go ahead.
I go back to the issue that you have to hit people where it hurts. If there are no consequences to the other side, we can't really convince them to listen to us. So I go back to the protections given to the police officers. If you are going to behave badly and you retain your pension and you retain many other rights, and the system doesn't allow your prosecution, then we're really just beating up our lips, because if there are no consequences, why should I listen? Yes, there's some other facets, and I think this is where the generational changes may come in as we continue to teach our children to do better. And as Elder Vanderhorst says, we may not see it in our lifetime. So those are some other issues, but I think we really have to have a focus also on changing the consequences to the people who are misbehaving.
Okay, good. Anybody else would like to add to that?
I just wanted to piggyback off of what my colleague just spoke on about, she had referred to me earlier in her comments about qualified immunity and thinking about that. I just wanted to talk about that. There was a recent announcement that was incorrect. They said that, oh, Maryland has done away with qualified immunity. Qualified immunity essentially means that an officer cannot be sued civilly unless there is some sort of blatant, egregious ignorance of some sort of constitutional right, that they've basically violated someone's constitutional right, and it has to be blatant. Okay, that's why the standard was so high. Maryland, under the most recent act, I think the Maryland Police Accountability Act, just lowered the standard. So there's still qualified immunity, but now Maryland's standard is there doesn't have to be a blatant violation of the constitutional right. There just needs to be a showing that the officer's behavior was disproportionate, right? So what they're saying to officers now is, you can act, but your actions must be proportionate. And everyone was cheering. But again, your original question was identifying the recognition. There was a recognition that there was a problem, right? Mm-hmm. And that is why this act came about. And everyone was cheering. Oh my goodness, they've done away with qualified immunity. No, it still exists. It still exists. It's just that the standard has been a little bit lowered, so it would allow for more people to sue officers who act improperly. So yes, there's a slow recognition of a problem. But your original question, Dr. Melbourne, was, can you solve a problem if you can identify it? The answer is no. You can't. Yeah. Because how would you know to solve it? How would you know to address it unless you can identify it? What's happening though, is that the problem is not a lack of identification, it's a lack of acknowledgement. So.
Precisely. And I cannot be helped if I don't acknowledge that I need help. And I think that's where some of the problem is. The folks are not acknowledging that they have a problem. Therefore, the help that can be available is not being taken care of. Before I get to two questions that I have in the chat, let me just do this one here that's also related. The psychological effects of social media can scare our children to become defensive, perceived aggressive when they question authority. So the question then becomes, what role does the media have? What role does the media play in what is going on? Are they stereotyping our kids? And are they refraining from addressing the deeper issues that need to be solved? How do we respond?
You know, I think, I very quickly, I'll just say this. You know, I think social media is creating conflict. It is information that's being shared in a forum. It's not vetted. No one knows what's credible and incredible. And what you find occurring is that people are sharing information with their friends, and it gets passed on, and no one knows if it's true or not. And quite more often than not, it's incorrect. And so it creates an atmosphere of conflict. And so, you know, all of the some of the racial issues that we are dealing with is just being fomented by incorrect information that's being shared. You know, we saw what happened after the insurrection. The president, or the former president of the United States, was blocked from social media. The reason why that was necessary is because he was sharing false information, and that information was being shared. And so, you know, these media companies recognized pre-election that once they started putting, you know, like corrections on information that he was sharing, the information stopped being passed along. And so, you know, social media has the ability to spread false information very quickly and create conflict.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else would like to add to that?
I would just say that figures lie, and liars figure. And with the media plays the game of getting viewership. So when they put out false information, it's breaking news. And it's always breaking news, but the news is never really accurate. And because it's not accurate, you get a false sense of justice being served or justice being put out there. But in actuality, it's not. It's just, they're just blurting out just to be the first ones to get the information out. And it's usually false information. So if we continually follow that pathway, yes, the former president and his constituents will always put out false information, because false information is believed upon by those who follow them. And all that does is create adversaries to the media, which you're asked questions based upon false information, and they just play against each other. So the media causes a lot of controversy, it causes a lot of problems, and it causes a lot of problems for the law enforcement agencies as well. Because if we want to retain information so that we get the true identity of things that's going on, we can't get it because false information is going out there consistently before we ever have the chance to vet the information that's being presented. And that causes a lot of problems within the law enforcement agencies as well.
Thank you, sir. Nkosi, you had a...
Yes, I was saying, I agree with Dr. Vanderhorst about the youth and the younger generation being cultivated. I believe that the younger generation are being cultivated right now in a negative way through social media. Majority of what the youth intake is from social media. Social media, when we see these things happening, people getting shot, you can actually see a person getting shot by the police on social media. You can see a person dying on social media. Young children are being exposed to this. And this has a traumatic effect on their minds. Anybody who sees this on social media, this does traumatize them in some sort of way. To see the current state of America. I believe that social media does play an effect in how we view racism. It plays an effect on how we view a lot of things. I don't think that there'll ever be a time where everybody's off social media, but social media does create, it does have an agenda for chaos. That is the main agenda, to get people's minds. You know, it's all about content. And these things are nowadays, the younger generation's mental, not capacity, but it doesn't take much to hold their mind. Their minds are like going like this all the time, very fast. And so information is always being fed to them. You know, this is why you have your news feed, your Instagram feed, your Facebook feed, it's being fed. There has been some positive things out of social media as well as negative, as we see the Black Lives Matter movement, which did gain its grounding in social media, people on Twitter, Instagram coming together to march, to make change. But there's also been negative side effects to that, as we see riots, as we see fighting, as we see these things happening in the cities of vandalism and so forth. I believe that social media does have an effect on our minds, especially the youth.
Thank you, sir. All right, here's a question. As a white male who recognizes white privilege, it seems to me that church and politics are a big part of systemic racism. When racist messages primarily come from one political party that has the backing of white evangelicals, what steps can be taken to make change within a political party or the religious right? Excellent question. Who would like to take that? Let me repeat it. As a white male who recognizes white privilege, it seems to me that church and politics are a big part of systemic racism. When racist messages primarily come from one political party that has the backing of white evangelicals, what steps can be taken to make change within a political party or the religious right? John, I may have to jump on you, religious liberty.
So let me say this. You know, it almost feels like it is impossible to change the current political dynamic in this country. We are divided politically, and racially. And, you know, the Black church is on one side of the spectrum and the white church is on the other. And there seems to be no common foundation from which to speak. You know, we have got a very difficult task ahead of us. You know, this is why the problem is so intractable and so difficult to deal with. But again, we should have a common ground in Scripture. And I think we need, you know, within the Black community and within the Black church, we need to really develop a theology around the corrosive nature of racism. We have not necessarily done that. We've made statements, but we have not really studied this thing from the Bible and understood its real impact. And until we begin to really drill down and create that sort of theology, and then present it to the other side to sort of pull them in our direction, I don't think any real change will take place.
Okay, it is indeed a very difficult problem. There are some books out there that deal with the idea of the religious right and their view of the former president and why they worship at his shrine, and the benefits that they got from him and he got from them that would be very good to read to inform this issue. I'd like to take a pause from the questions right now. In our midst, we have Dr. Yolanda Kearney, who has been a diplomat to the Caribbean and to Africa, among other places. and she'd like to make a contribution in respect to our discussion as it affects America and America's image internationally. Dr. Kearney.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. I have greatly enjoyed your various perspectives. You're all correct about addressing the family unit, addressing support for children, and all of that. But I want to look at this from where I'm most comfortable, which is a policy lens. Money follows policy, and not the other way around. That's been my experience. And so part of my job as a Foreign Service officer is to go to the podium and explain to foreign publics the United States culture and history, and including United States current events. So the first time that I had to go to the podium after a really well publicized killing of a Black man by a police officer was Stephon Clark. And so I received lots of questions about, Yolanda, how can you and your government be advising my government about anything when you have this pervasive issue? And the facts are the facts. And so there are a couple of things. The first is that the State Department has something called the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs, INL. And that bureau partners with foreign nations to counter international crime, illegal drug trade, and the instability that comes from crime. We know that crime causes, and criminal activity causes instability in neighborhoods and in communities. So INL uses tax dollars to help other countries to improve their ability to deliver justice. We support strengthening criminal justice institutions, including at the national, the regional, and the local law enforcement levels, and corrections agencies. So INL does things like talk with governments about, what do you do with juvenile offenders? Do you make sure that they are not housed with adults? Are they going to be able to continue their education while they're in remand? All of those types of issues. So there's something that exists. It's called the INL Partnership. It's just the INL Partnership Guide, because if a country wants to partner with us, and this comes with tax dollars, US tax dollars, then there's some baseline requirements that are outlined clearly in the INL guide. They can only become partners after the partnership proposals are reviewed. So in that guide, it talks specifically about, what do we expect? What do we, the United States of America, expect of international police departments and corrections agencies? And so part of the ongoing domestic discussion has been looking at the INL guide and applying those same standards to the United States of America. So what I'm for your insomniac moments, I'm going to put a link to it in the chat if ever you are interested. It is updated every 2 years in September of odd years. So in 2021, September of this year, it will be updated most recently, but the 2019 guide is what I just put there. So in it, you will see all sorts of things. What do you do about community policing? Do the police live in their neighborhoods? All the things that we know help to strengthen police departments and law enforcement. And the question is, if we know how to do this abroad, then certainly we know how to do this at home. So part of that policy discussion has been sort of a reversal of our foreign policy stance, which is apply the same standards for community policing and standards of policing at home in the United States that we do internationally. So I just toss that out to you because there are two sides to this discussion, right? There's the ongoing what's happening domestically and how our police departments and the Justice Department and others talking about policing in the United States. To be fair, federal police have a whole different sort of purview and lots of issues from state and local police. So the first thing is that we are decentralized. And so that can become its own really interesting perspective. And that's not the same thing in a lot of other countries. But trying to figure out how it is that we can get it so right in other countries, but get it quite so wrong at home. So I submit that for your again, your insomniac moments and your late night reading.
Thank you, Dr. Kearney. I appreciate that. And let's see the link in the chat that we can look at to get some further information on that. That's a very intriguing notion, or enforcing it abroad on others, but not enforcing it at home for our own citizens. All right, here's another question. I like the idea Petra suggested of getting to know police in our neighborhoods. How are some of the ways Black males can approach neighborhood police to get to know them and develop a rapport with them? Now I'm going to ask Mrs. Conrad and Lieutenant Woods to address this for me.
That was one of the popular programs in policing when I was on the force. And it was always a good thing because it personalized people and not a representation of the police department. It brought it down to the level of I meet you, you meet me, and we get to know each other. And I think that's a very important perspective. I think it humanizes this whole issue. And I do believe a lot of the things that everyone has said tonight, especially dealing with, it's a social issue and it's a heartfelt issue. It's a God-based issue. I think when you bring the tools of ministry into it, you start to see ways that you can overcome this thing. And, you know, to get, to have God's perspectives on inside of you and his words strengthening you brings a whole new ability for everyone to be able to reach across the table and have some sense of community. So I do think that policing and coming together with the community on a personalized level is very important and very valuable. I think a way to do it is to have particular officers assigned to making perhaps representatives at the schools where they can meet, especially the youth. That's one of the ways how I got involved with being interested in becoming a police officer, because we had police officers come to the schools and talk to the kids, and they got to know them on a more personal level. So yes, I agree. That's a great thing to instill, and so that they become more familiar with police and who they are in their neighborhood, and not as something that is away from them or unknown to them, but actually a known to them. So this is good.
Thank you. Lieutenant Woods.
It's definitely necessary in the community. First and foremost, the police officers have to make themselves available in the community. You have to make themselves where they are seen. Go to some of the community events, some of the football games, basketball games, social events, where they are available for some of the young youths to interact with them directly. You have to open themselves up to be available to communicate with them, to socialize with them, to interact with them. Most of the times you'll have the youth, some of your, especially your younger youth, who they're intrigued about you as a police officer. It was a time where a police officer career was very attractive. It's not so much now, but there's still a lot of questions, especially when I go around of youth who know that I'm a police officer. They have a lot of questions about, you know, if it's equipment, vehicles, my job, what I'm doing. Even the questions of have you ever arrested somebody or things like that. But most important for officers to make themselves available. And I definitely agree with the young lady who said that, you know, the individual departments, you know, send out representatives. But more important than that, you know, the mindset of police officers themselves individually just wanted to make themselves available and want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Thank you. All right. Next question. What is currently required in the form of psychological mental health testing evaluation for law enforcement officers? And at what stages in their careers? If it is present, what would it take for those in law enforcement to request more frequent evaluation within the system?
Let me start with that, Dr. Melbourne. For most agencies, it's done initially, and for most of them, that's the only time it's done. I'm a firm believer that it needs to be revisited throughout the career of a police officer, because your mindset does change from when you start throughout your career. Things happen, you see things, you're influenced by things, and I think our evaluation needs to be updated constantly and currently throughout your career.
All right, Ms. Conrad, anything?
I'd like to respond a little bit on that, if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
I agree with what Mr. Woods just had mentioned as well. And also we should be going a little further with testing in the realm of psychological, a little further, a little deeper, perhaps looking at the social interactions and how people respond in different circumstances and situations to reveal that it is in the area where it reveals racism. I know there's a way to psychologically profile the questions, so to speak, to identify that in a psychological realm of investigation. So if you had that as a component of the testing, that could really play an impactful part in weeding out potential things where there are problems before it ever gets in. Because so many, one of the, I believe it was Dr. Kearney that mentioned that so many of the police departments are different. Their testing is completely different from the next. And on the federal level is completely different from state and local. So the bar of how the testing goes on is all over the board. Some police departments have absolutely no psychological testing. And they also pull from very young officers that have high school educations, and that's it. So, and very little college and very little in the social training. So, or the psychological based training or socialization. So all those things are so important when you're pulling somebody over and you're starting to discern what's going on in the car. What are the activities of the people? What could be going on? And if you have an officer that's like 22 years old and not have been exposed to a lot of things in life that could inform you to give you more discernment and wisdom, then you're probably going to have a lot of issues. And if you're coming from a background that's full of rage or hate, or you've been exposed to other things in your life that are ugly, you might be taking it out on someone else that you encounter. So those are the things I think that are important to have the psychological testing try to identify before they ever get in. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I just add something?
Go right ahead, sir.
In addition to what both of these individuals have stated, I was thinking through this, and my daughter's an educator. My eldest daughter's an educator, and she's done a lot of teacher training, especially in critical race theory and so forth. And she really gave me some insight there, because there's so much pushback around the country with critical race theory in education. And she says it is one of the bases that it is wrong is because education is not the initiator of critical race theory. It was lawyers, it was attorneys who were questioning certain things going on as far as policies and so forth. And they were the ones who actually initiated critical race theory, not public schools. And so with these attorneys dealing with wanted a critical race theory to really look at certain things that were going on in society. But my point simply is, I believe that there should be some mandatory certifications of police officers, one being the critical race theory, you know, other aspects of certifications, ongoing certifications. You know, most professions want upgrades for their employees in certifications, teachers during the summer and so forth, and CEs and so forth. Well, what about police officers with mandatory certifications, especially in specific areas of cultural sensitivity, certain things that they must have if they want to continue in their particular profession and work also. I believe that in addition, after the psychological profiles and psychological tests and all of the attendant things on that wise, also certifications throughout the year, throughout their career, may be an added emphasis to inform and instruct, to redirect socializations that many of them grew up with, to be able to have more information. And as the adage says, the most important decisions are the most informed decisions.
Thank you. A question that has not come up yet that I'd like probably to address here. Are there continuing education units that police officers have to take each year?
Yes, there is. And I know from the Pentagon agency, we're ongoing training all the time. And that is cultural diversity training, ethics training. But it's only as good as the one who's learning it, who's willing to learn it. And it only works if you really truly want to have it. Now, I know for a fact that every agency does not have training such as this. And it's the small agencies that can't fund this kind of training that fall to the wayside, and they're the ones that wind up on the 6 o'clock news because they don't have the training that is needed to become better citizens. And as police officers, this is a very, very high demanding job. And it's a job, it's not a lifestyle. And we have to get away from it being a lifestyle and make it more of an occupation of well-trained and well-maintained officers. So I agree with you, Dr. Vanderhoos, that the misinformed need to be educated, as well as a lot of these officers are not being trained properly because they don't have the funding to be trained properly. So when you talk about defunding the police departments, you're talking about the major departments. You're talking about major cities. But if you defund a small agency, you take away any money that they're receiving, then you're jeopardizing putting a person out there who's uneducated as well as untrained properly. And I think that it should be a reallocation of monies to the behavioral sciences so that they can be better trained to do the job right. And that it should be just as ongoing as firearms training and self-defense training. This training, psychological training and behavioral training should come into play of understanding people and cultural diversity. This should be an ongoing every year event with certification. Because until we reach a point of empathy towards our fellow persons, we will never truly understand what it is to be in their shoes.
Yeah.
And a lot of these officers come from out of the areas in which they police. So they really don't have a cultural understanding of what's going on. And maybe before they even become police officers, as a part of their employment, is that they have to learn the cultural background in which they're policing, which they're about to police, so that they can become more educated on who they're about to encounter. Because if I'm a white person coming from Montgomery County and I'm working in DC as a police officer in the sixth ward in the sixth district, I'm not going to have any idea of what I'm dealing with. And I know that I'm going to go home at the end of the night. And I know that all I'm trying to do is get home. I don't care what happens here as long as I get home. So in order for me to become better educated, I need to be immersed and learn the cultural differences. And that comes from cultural diversity training.
Okay.
And Dr. Moore, let me add in if I can. Like Dr. Lee said, we are fortunately with our department that we do a lot of training. Some say that we do too much training sometimes, but if the mindset of the person who's taking the training doesn't change, is relevant to what they're doing, all we're doing is just checking another box. We're not changing anything. We're not changing their mindset. They're going through training, but they don't really care about the training. They're going through training because the agency mandates them to go through training, and not because they really care about learning something or anything different. To touch on another topic, or touch on that further, is like the young lady said previously, is that the hiring process and who we bringing in as police officers these days, we're not bringing in people who really intended to be police officers. Most of them, they go to school, and because they can't get a job in their career or in their field that they study, they opt out to be a police officer because police officers or agencies are hiring right away, and they got to pay bills, they got to pay back debts and student loans and things like that. So their intentions were never to be a police officer. So they're taking on these jobs where they don't understand what it means to be a police officer, don't understand what it means to be a public service and to serve people, or don't want to learn the differences of others. They just want the job. So that's part of the problem that we're dealing with also.
Thank
Just
you.
a question, Mr. Woods. For the point of many who may take some trainings, but if they don't have the right frame of mind or whatever, my point or premise is, shouldn't the trainings then lend to accountability? So you had it, you should understand, you should know you violated these things, and now there are certain consequences because of that. I'm not saying training for training's sake, but to lend to that information base, that knowledge base for accountability also. What are your thoughts about that?
I definitely agree. I definitely agree. However, the accountability to speak of, that's more of a reactive. Reactive, and most of our agencies, and like Dr. Lee said, we touch on some of those critical training that you should go through. Well, a lot of them doesn't, and even with us, we need to go back and to change the curriculum of some of the training we do to apply to what's going on today, and what we are dealing with. A lot of them are just standard training that we go through every year, but it doesn't address the root of what's really going on, and provide you with the tools that would that you'll be able to use in dealing with problems that you face with.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is now 7:42. Time has flown. What I'd like to do is there are two more questions in the chat that I'll deal with. I'll ask Pastor Wright to prepare his question. His will be the last question. Then I'll ask the panel each to give a closing thought. So now to the last two comments in the chat. One says the label alien remains targeted on us. We are viewed as outsiders if we do not bear a certain skin color. Who sit in these offices that continue to reinforce laws riddled with racism? Is there anyone on this panel who is currently advocating for our Black youths, especially young men, where we can give our support. And I'd say certainly, I think Collaborate to Educate Our Sons is trying to do that. And I think Prepare Our Youth and its sister organization also, they also do that. So yes, we are trying to advocate for our Black youth because that is what we have to do. One of the things I planned to share this evening was I started out with 10 ways to help our youth, 10 things to do when you meet the police. Then it became 12, then it became 18, but listening to the discussion tonight, they are obsolete because the things we were asking them to do at that point, they're being reactive and it's reinforcing the status quo. So we'll have to go back to the drawing board as well. And I think we all need to give, serious thought to this because this is really a serious issue that needs addressing. The next is there is also a need for basic mental health training on how to approach an individual struggling with mental health issues, especially our Black, brown, red brothers and sisters. I think on that, and I don't know if members of the panel would like to have this. I don't think mental health issues should be part of policing. That's not one of the jobs for the police. That's one of the things they are currently doing, but I don't think it's their job. And that's also something that I think we need to rethink. Anybody else would like to add to that?
I would like to speak to that because as a police officer on road patrol, you don't know who you're going to encounter or responding to a call. There be many persons of disabled or suffering from some sort of mental health issues. And if you're not aware or sensitive, I'm sorry?
Somebody needs to mute. Please mute. Please mute. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
Shall I continue?
Yes, go ahead.
So if the officer is not sensitive to persons with disabilities or mental health awareness, then they could easily mistake it for something else, some sort of aggression, and go immediately to the weapons, and it's unnecessary. I'm not saying it's always unnecessary, but there should be absolute discernment where they start from minimal force, as in their voice, to communicate, to understand, before they ever go to accelerate to weapons or their sidearm or anything like that. And all the time that I was an officer on the road and as an FBI agent with many persons under arrest, it was never going to be the gun that was going to resolve a situation. It was the heart that extends to the person that you're with, and in trying to resolve the problem or the matter or lend understanding, and you not seeking to harm, but to be an officer of service. Like some of the other officers have said, we became officers to help, not to destroy. And I just want folks to understand that so many officers are really trying to do their best to help their community. Thank you.
Okay. If it is a Black training, it is a lack of training. Why are only the white cops killing Blacks? Are the white police trained differently than the Black police? Good question. Anybody would like to take that? So it seems to me that it's more than training.
It is.
There's something more to it. And as a matter of fact, I did come across an article recently that talked about the FBI finding application material for the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, in a police officer's home. And it's not just one night thing. So it seems to me it's more than training.
And let me say this, Dr. Melbourne, it's the person who sits in the chair that makes the difference. And as a white officer sitting next to a black officer getting the same training, it's how that white officer perceives that training and utilizes that training that makes the difference. And sadly, if you come in there with a racist attitude, you're going to walk out with a racist attitude, but now you're going to know how to dance around the situation. It's until we get the behavioral change and the spiritual change in the person is really going to make a difference in how they perceive that training. And I know that for me, it is the training that I've learned that has helped me to become a better officer, but it's what I brought to the table before I became an officer that makes the difference. And it's the understanding that I was raised by parents who loved me and cared about me and taught me reason right from wrong and love over hate that made the difference for me being a law enforcement officer and the police officer to become a peace officer. Not just going to sit down in a chair to get a gun and make decisions and shoot people. And too many of these officers come with this attitude that they're cowboys and that they're going to right the wrongs of America. And that's why we had the situation in January 6th. That's why we have these situations with George Floyd and all these other Tamir Rice and all these other people that have taken it upon themselves that they're going to right the wrongs of America through their will and their might. So it's the training. We always see this. We always see the same training, but it's the person who's being trained that makes the difference.
Okay. Good. Pastor Wright.
Yes, Doc, you put me on the spot here. I don't know if it's a question or a statement, but I can say something here, and that is that, and then maybe a question will pop up on the way. How about that? I believe that the church has a very pivotal role to play in our society today, and in the, what you may call it, the making gradual inroads into this racial divide as we move along. I don't believe that we can wait around for people to help us outside of our communities. We can't wait for that. Not that we won't find a few to help us, because over the years, we have people of various races have walked with us and marched with us and have helped to effect change. And we want to salute them and thank them, because without them, we would not have made it. But I do believe that one of the great things that we can do is to actually begin from the church and the schools, private schools or Christian schools especially. We can start to train our children to understand that they're worth a lot, they're somebody, they're special, and also let them understand that education is really the greatest tool we have, other than prayer. Of course, prayer is number one, where we educate our children, help them to get great jobs, help them to be a part of the police force also, encourage our children. You know, many of the police forces that we have, a lot of Irish people are there and this and that, but we can allow for that integration where our people are part of the police force, so they now are policing themselves. and as a result, you know, we should see a different outcome. So I think also one of the things that we need to try to foster is unity. Many of us are not very united, because even in our community, you have one person say this and say the other thing, and we can't coalesce around a theme and around a goal, and we can't get the job done because there's so many people who even sell out, so to speak, and are not willing to work together cohesively. Somebody was telling me today that one preacher said even in a church that's going the wrong way, if they're united, they still accomplish something. So we need to be united. I think that's what we need to be. All these black churches need to come together and work together. You know, you have a few black churches that are gone on the other side and believe that we're the worst person. And the first argument they bring is that in Chicago, that a lot of the blacks are killing each other. That's the greatest argument. When we need to recognize that these people need God, they need to be taught about their worth. And if they can get that exposure, if we can get some of the rich people to help to fund foundations like yours and others that we can come up with, we will be able to lift a lot of our people out of the gutter of degradation and take them to the penthouse of success. That's what I believe.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask each panelist to give a closing statement, after which I'll make a statement. I see that I have another board member here who happens to be also a college president. And I'm going to ask him towards the end to give us a statement on how this affects our youth at the college level. And then I'll also ask him to be prepared to give the benediction for us.
Man.
All righty. So then, let's have closing statements from the panel members. Who'd like to begin?
I can go.
I'll begin. Oh. No, please, Denise, please.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I was just going to say, thank you so much for everything this evening. But closing statements from, I'm just pulling in from everybody's energy, which has been beautiful. I'm thinking, God, number one, courage and wisdom for the youth to be strong and informed and determined that no matter what happens, they can do it and they will overcome. Education from a young age, involvement with the police departments, to have reserve officers, to bring that back at a young, like teenagers, to ride with police officers, to begin to know them and know the culture. That could be something that forms union in the community. That's one thing. Another thing to think about. Then hiring police officers, mental health, and an education of the behavioral sciences. It must be there. And the testing of the psychological profiling to see if it's a problem. They should not be police officers. They just should not be. And thank you very much. I appreciate everyone and have a good evening.
Thank you.
I will say this very quickly. I think that as a community of faith, perhaps we need to redefine what it means to preach the gospel. Perhaps preaching the gospel means creating nurturing environments for our youth. We used to do that as a church. We were pretty good at it, and we've kind of lost our way along those lines. And so, you know, as a community of faith, I would recommend that we re-engage in nurturing the youth in our church. We partner with organizations that are doing that, and we build them up and we work together. In addition, I think as a community of faith, we need to speak boldly against evil. And so when we see violence taking place against certain communities, we have to be very vocal. We have to be very strong in condemning it, so that our members have a sense that, you know, there's an urgent situation taking place. Thirdly, we have to, as a community, become engaged politically. We cannot sit on the sidelines and not tell our members that they need to vote. I mean, it's crucial. And, you know, lastly, we then also have to partner with the local community policing in our neighborhoods as churches. Invite the police to our church, have them engage and talk to our youth, so that, you know, we begin to build some degree of trust, so that we can move forward. But, you know, we know that the problems are difficult. Racism is here. It's a permanent part of our society. And, you know, we have to daily deal with it, and we can't, you know, push it aside like it doesn't exist. We have to continue to confront it.
Okay. Petra, you have been waiting to go.
Oh, thanks. Many thanks to Dr. Melbourne for the invitation again. It was a pleasure to speak on this panel with all the other distinguished panelists. For me, my takeaway and what I'd like to just synthesize is bring back community policing, real community policing. I had a thought, a couple of my colleagues were talking yesterday because Chief Judge Barbara Barbera, she's Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals of Maryland. She sits on the highest seat in our court. And she has to retire in September. She sat and presided over her final oral argument yesterday. And so now there's this big rush, to fill her seat. But every lawyer in the state of Maryland can apply. Only lawyers from Montgomery County can apply. Why? That is because the seat that she's vacating comes from Montgomery County. Each judge has to represent a different jurisdiction in the state of Maryland. And I thought about when a judge has to make an application to sit on the bench. If you are going to, for example, sit on a bench, a circuit court bench in Baltimore City, you have to live in Baltimore City. If you are going to sit on a bench, a circuit court bench in Montgomery County, you have to live in Montgomery County. That's a requirement of judges. Why? Because you are in no position to judge a person you don't know. Why is that same policy not implemented with policing? I don't understand. I recall as a prosecutor, that many of my officers, I had the hardest time sometimes getting them in because they were coming from Pennsylvania. Really? The people that you are policing live in Baltimore City, but your family, your connections are in another state. So I think community policing needs to be brought back, policing to police their own communities. Why? That will make sure that the citizens know who the officers are. The elders will know, hey, I knew you growing up. Okay? I saw you. I was part of your rearing and your growing and your growth. And here you are as a police acting up. You see what I'm saying? The citizens can hold them accountable. They will be accountable to the citizenry if everyone knows each other. So that's just my big takeaway from this conversation. My hope is that if everyone treats each other as a neighbor, there'll be less fear. Yes, racism will not go away until Jesus comes, but until then, we have to occupy. And part of occupying is getting to know who you're sitting next to. That will remove fear, distrust, and so I think that will be that should be a part of the resolution, I think, for this particular issue. So thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you.
May I?
Sure.
We've had a good discussion with many options that are worthwhile. My conflict is, where do we go from here? I don't know that it's a conflict, but I don't want to be a part of more discussions about what's wrong and what they should do. I want to see something where we have some suggestions as to what could we individually do. I'm not saying I have the answers. I'm saying I would like to see us talk about our roles. How could we contribute to make this better? Because as long as we continue to say what they should do and what should happen, it's not going to change. That's my only comment.
That's very, very pertinent. And I'd like to address that. Okay. Who'd be next?
I'll go. And I totally believe in what you're saying, Ms. Silva. And Fannie Lou Hamer said it best when she said, you can pray until you faint, but until you get up and do something, God's not going to put it in your lap. And we we can talk until we're blue in the face. But the fact of the matter is that until this is implemented, until our thoughts are implemented, it becomes just a great moment. If we really want to do a great movement, then we must implement something and stand behind it and support it. And I know Dr. Melbourne has something in mind, and I'm all for it. I'm all for change. That's the hardest thing for police officers to do, is to change, but I'm all for change. And Mr. Ashby, you made mention about the church, and Galatians 3:28 and Colossians 3:11 both state there's neither nor Jew nor Gentile. We're all the same when we come into the mind of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. So we're all as Christians, we're all the same, no matter if we believe that Christ is or isn't. If we truly believe in Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior, then we're all the same. But for the saddest thing is that churches are segregated every Sunday. The most segregated time in the United States history has been Sundays, because we all appease to our own version of Jesus Christ. So for that being said, we all need to understand that Jesus Christ came to save the world, not Christians. He came to save those who are disenfranchised, those who are marginalized, those who are not looked upon as being a part of the status quo. So in order for us to do that, we must reach down and reach up at times to serve those who need to be served and to protect those who need to be protected. And as a police officer and as a pastor and as a Black man, I'm holding myself accountable for that I make a change in the way things are going on. And I'm going to do that by implementing my dissertation, which brings churches and law enforcement together in such a way that we build bridges and not walls. And maybe we need to, as a church, need to adopt a police station, a police precinct. And maybe, with implementing the community back to community policing, even if it's in the federal government, because we don't actually have a jurisdiction per se, but we have buildings, but we learn to embrace the community in which we're in, that we get to know everybody that's in that community. And until we get to know everybody that's in the community, we can't really do community policing. So I thank you all for this time. And again, until we do something, this is all going to be for naught.
Thank you, sir. Who's next?
What a privilege and honor to be a part of a community and panel such as this. Thank you again, CEOS, and Dr. Melbourne for inviting me and having me. Some of the things that I received from this discussion is, one, the importance of community policing. The police having a relationship with the community that they are policing is important. I feel like at this point, the police need some very good PR in some type of way, because if you go on social media, you will see that the police are not the best of people. They are very good people in the policing force. Another thing that I received from this is educating the youth, cultivating the youth, the next generation coming. And I believe that when, I just feel like everyone here on the panel is like doctors, so I just want to put doctor in front of your name, or like Silvera, for some reason. But as she was talking about, what are we going to do moving forward from here? That's something I was asking myself as well. What am I going to do? And some of the things that I could think of, and I'm sure that more things will come to mind, is helping the youth around us, helping our community. Some of the ways that we can do that is, I'm sure many of us know some youth, know some children, pouring into them, helping them. If you don't know any youth or children, CEOS has a bundle of young men and women alike to help. They've helped me in many different ways. And so you can help right now by donating or being a volunteer or mentor, volunteering to mentor with CEOS. And so that's what I'm pledging to do as I learn more ways on how I can help my community during this time. You know, sharing the wisdom I have, helping those who are before me or after me, coming after me. Another thing that I've gained from this panel is we're all in this together. It's not a you versus me, a us versus them situation, because that is disunity. That is separation. And the only way that we can truly overcome is if we do it together. If we understand and realize that the change begins with ourselves. And so the community that we have here, every single person here, I mean, this is a community and this is an opportunity. This is just not a panel for you to listen to and gain insight. This is a panel for you to not only gain insight, but gain inspiration and motivation to make change. And so thank you again for the opportunity and the opportunity to be amongst all of you. An inspiring discussion on how we can make change in our community, how we are to respond to police brutality, and how we can do better moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll go next, sir. Again, like I stated at the beginning, I'd like to just thank you for the opportunity to be a part of this very important panel, this town hall meeting. And this topic is very important to me. It's something that I'm very passionate about. As we move forward, I definitely want to continue my work as trying to bridge that gap. Like the gentleman said, that us against them mentality. One of the most popular metaphors that we've heard, all of us heard in police work, is called the thin blue line. That's something that I used to be a strong advocate of, the thin blue line. But for most people, the thin blue line represents a line drawn in the sand. It represents that us against them. We police officers, we need to change the mindset that we not a thin blue line. We're like a weaving thread that throughout the community that we address different entities of the community and getting involved. So hopefully that mindset can change and we continue to get to the core root of community policing. And, you know, and like gentleman said, also working together to gain back the trust and gain back the respect of our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a couple of things. Number one, one of the greatest things the Holy Spirit has taught me in counseling is when I'm not the one to do it. I know it is said that the Black church should be involved, but I don't know if the Black church is the one to do it. I do, however, believe that there can be an entity in the Black church to do it. United Church of Christ has a social justice department. They've had that for years. I remember way back when Dr. Ben Chavis was the director of their social justice department. So when you say the church needs to get involved, I don't know if every member, I don't know how all of that actually would flesh out when we say the church. but I do know that there can be a specific entity assigned who is equipped to address specific issues that involve the village, that involve community. Now, for the past 40 years, with my organization, Prepare Our Youth, we have developed interventions, things that actually can be done, and we do trainings. And this is going to what Attorney Silvera was intimating, basically, where we do trainings. I have a manual that I created called Communiversity. And this is continuing education to the community, where you can take every profession and vocation in your church and use it to teach community. It is a non-proselytizing entity that your church now becomes the educational hub for your community. So all of the business persons will come together to do entrepreneurial skills and so forth. Any entity that you have can come together for the community. This is Communiversity. I have a manual for that I wrote. I have interventions. I completed an intervention called Homeboy, which means helping our males excel while breaking our yokes. It's a 12-session group level intervention that we can train anybody to do this intervention in your communities, so that they can understand. I'm bringing forth a construct called post-traumatic upbringing syndrome. You see, Dr. Joy DeGruy wrote Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and you've got to read that book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, where she deals with the generational adaptations of survival behavior. Well, I have a concept coming off of that called Post-Traumatic Upbringing Syndrome, you see, that I'm bringing forth. So you'll see Vanderhorst in parentheses 2021, but that we're dealing with Black males. I started an LLC called Seed Planter International. I'm getting my website done, but I do have a Facebook page for Seed Planter International, which is dedicated to, uniquely for, and unapologetically about Black males. And so I have a manual that's about to come forth for boys 13 to 18 called Man School. Where this is courses that can be, you can be trained to do man school in your sphere of influence, in your community, in your churches, in whatever organizations or entity that you use. So I have things, so Prepare Youth, we have things that can come right off the page and right into your entity organization for training, for implementation. So it's one thing to talk about stuff, but if we don't have interventions, you know, we're just going to discuss things. So we have trainings, we have resources that can be utilized right now. And I will say this lastly, I'm a boomer. I'll be 67 years old this year. I have committed myself, and I'm trying to get my boomer generation, folk I know, to become what I call provisionaries. You see, there's like a disconnect with boomers and millennials and Gens X, Y, and Z. Well, as provisionaries, when a young person has a vision, it is now the boomer's responsibility to make provision that their vision might be realized. We have the knowledge, the expertise, we have the resources, we can write letters of recommendation, all of the things that we can do as provisionaries, because we have to sow into these younger generations. So you can contact me. I'll put my contact information in the chat and so forth. If your organization, your church, your entity wants more information, you want training, you want to access Communiversity manual or whatever we have available, that is part of the solution. Thank you, Dr. Melbourne, and thank you, panel.
Good, thank you. Dr. Spence. How does this affect you at your level? And a sentence or two. Unmute yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Melbourne, for putting this on. On behalf of the board, I want to thank the panelists and all the participants this evening for dealing with a difficult topic, but one that must be addressed. And I've learned a lot from every comment that has been made. And at my level, how I'm dealing with this at the university level, where young people are coming to the university every day. And I have a tagline that says, we are going to engage your minds and transform your lives. This is a growing environment for young people. When we're ready to protest, we protest together. We are in the business of teaching them right from wrong and using the Jesus Christ methodology. Love your enemies, but don't put up with foolishness. Did you get that one?
Yeah.
Not retaliate. I'm not talking about retaliation now, because that belongs to God. If you want to help your blood pressure, just leave the retaliation to God and just love your enemies. We're launching a summit later on this fall, simply because of what many of you mentioned this evening, is that there is a lot of conversations going on. As a matter of fact, I've learned that there are a lot of laws that have been implemented around racism. Amazing, but it still exists. There's a lot of conversation that goes on, but it still exists. As a matter of fact, even within the church, I've just read a book that's called Disunity in Christ. If we are all part of the body of Christ, why do we fight among each other so much? I personally believe that individually, and I think this goes along with Dr. Van der Haus's point, individually, we have to manage our own biases. We have to manage our own biases. We all have biases. How do we manage our own biases? You know, once a policeman stopped me and he came to my car and said, "What's your problem?" I said, "I don't have a problem." I said, you have an attitude? Wait a minute. First of all, you need to know how to approach me, because you're already confrontational. Just last Friday, another cop stopped me. And he was so professional, white guy, so professional, probably a rookie. I think he was on training. So professional. "My name is so-and-so. The reason I stopped you is so-and-so. This is being recorded." And I did my 10-2. but my father didn't teach me about 10-2 coming from the islands. You know, he talked to me about being respectful and expect professionalism and respect. There's no reason anybody should disrespect anybody. Stand up for your right. And probably the officers can guide me on this, but I think if we take the time when they do right things, like how this cop approached me, and I take the time to write a note back to the precinct and say, "This man was professional. I really admired his approach." And at the same time, do the same thing to the other guy who did not do the right thing. And make sure that we are not judgmental to folks, but we are managing our own biases, because we do have them. And that's how I think things will change, whether we are within the church environment, within the educational environment, within the community environment, is to teach. Education is a pathway to success. Laws help, certainly. And the attorneys on board will know that. You really need the laws to bring about enforcement, but there's some folks who work around that. We are putting on this summit in October 1, 2. And what I've asked the folks to do is move away now from the conversation and move to what actions individually we can take. Not as a group, individually. By the way, individuals make up the church, am I right? Individuals make up the community, am I right? So we need to own it as individuals and compliment people when they do well, Am I right, Officer Conrad? And at the same time, when we're doing that, you know, there may be retaliation from when you report an officer that they did not do things right. I mean, that could come also, but you can't be fearful of that. You have to do the right things at the right time and personally manage our biases. Because we need the police, but we need good police. We need good citizens. We need citizens, but we need good citizens. Citizens that are respectful and not judgmental. And that starts, I think, with individually as we move forward. Dr. Melbourne, you want me to pray now or?
I'll just make one statement and then you could pray. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for this very important conversation. And I agree that we need to move from talk to action. So I will be discussing a way forward if we can work with members of this group to work on a blueprint for us for CEOS that can help us in addressing this problem as we move forward. Thank you so very much.
Yes, I thought in the chat somebody asked for a book. The book that we are working on for our summit is called, it's by Christina Cleveland. It's called Disunity in Christ. She's a social psychologist, not a theologian, but she is Christ-based because her dad, I think, is a minister of the gospel. But she approaches it from a scientific standpoint, dealing with how individually we can address our biases and bring about a difference. Thank you again on behalf of the board, as a board member, for your participation this evening. And this, Dr. Melbourne, should be continued. Let us pray. Father God, we pause now to recognize that as individuals, we must play a part in spreading the gospel of love. Love at times requires us to stand firm for what is right. We are all part of a community, and we all are in need of each other. Oh yes, we need the police, we need the prisons, we need the church in order to bring about order in our land. But some have other reasons for dismantling what is in order. So Father, individually now we ask you to bind us with your love. Grant us your peace, your joy. And as we depart from this gathering, dismiss us with your blessings, we pray. For Christ's sake.
I want you to. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you for once again coming through with a powerful program. I noticed a few comments in chat, and we have truly enjoyed the program. I think we have been educated, and hopefully one day we'll be emancipated. I don't know, I'm anticipating that, but it's a long journey. But I think it begins with one step. So we are prepared to make that initial step to see how we can make things better for our community. I just want to thank your foundation and its board members and everyone affiliated with it for coming on and being with us. And you know, you're always welcome. I can never say no to my really good friend and mentor and friend of our family for way back. So anything you need, Doc, you know, you can always call. We will definitely answer. And we just want to, in a minute or so, you know, we'll open up the gallery view so that everybody who wants to say hi to each other can do that. But I just want to remind all of you who are here that we have some upcoming programs. Monday night, we have our Youth Vibes, and on Wednesday, we have our special Wednesday night praise and Thanksgiving service. And we also have a Friday night at 8 o'clock. All that will be at 8 o'clock. And on the 26th of this month, a young lady, I don't know if anybody heard about her. She's an alumnus of NCU, Corey Gordon. She has a big business with Amazon. She's in the 20s, 28, 29, whatever. She's coming on. We're going to have an interview with her on the 26th. We're going to talk to her a little about her success as an entrepreneur. So we're looking forward to that. And then on the 19th will be Father's Day program in the evening. It's going to be really good. We did a good job for the women, for the ladies, for the mothers, and they're trying to see if they can do something great too. So we're looking forward to that. So have a good evening, everyone. Also Tuesday, sorry, we have our lawyer will be here at 7 o'clock on the same platform. So we're inviting everyone who was on this evening to join us. Just take a quick view, 5 minutes, and if you have to run away, that's okay. All right, God bless you all and have a good night.